everyone. Welcome to another Ashram Talks session. Today, our topic is called like meeting a celebrity. Understanding God is like meeting a celebrity. So I want you to think about, for some of you who have maybe met a celebrity, someone famous, or someone you really admire, or if you haven't, I want you to take a minute to think about someone that you would really like to meet, right? Maybe you'd love to get a chance to speak with them, have lunch with them, ask them a question. Think about who this person is and, what are you feeling in that moment, right? Kind of what's going through your mind as you meet this person that you might really admire. So we're going to take a second to think about that. And as you go through this discussion today, I want you to try to hold on to that feeling and remember, what that's like, what that feels like as we approach this topic. So today we're joined by Haripriya Benedict. Welcome, Haripriya.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. And, Haripriya has been a yoga teacher to people who are famous, right? And who do experience that celebrity. So I'm sure that that might contribute, a little bit to your perspective on this topic today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I want to continue actually. I love that you asked that question. So yeah, so who do you want to meet? Who do you want to have lunch with? And it could be, anyone, someone that inspires you. For me, let's say I'll pick Tony Robbins. Okay, this is somebody who I've heard has been through, pain, suffering. He tells stories about how he was like, had no rent money and was overweight and treating his body badly. And then he woke up, he kind of decided, no, I'm choosing myself. And he picked himself up and moved forward. And now he's contributing to people's lives in very tangible, real ways. And he's living connected to his purpose and service. He talks about contribution being one of the most enjoyable parts, and that's because our nature is that we want to contribute, we want to love, we want to serve, we want to offer something up. So I would love to meet Tony Robbins. And so my question is to you also, like, you could type it in the chat too, like who do you want to meet, who do you want to have lunch with, or maybe even who do you want to become friends with, who would you love to be able to connect with on a regular basis, right? Because everybody who's a celebrity, they're humans, and they also crave things. They also crave friendship and intimacy and care and fun interactions. So now anyone who's listening, even online later, if you want to put it in the chat, I was like coming back and seeing, so who inspires others. So now I want to ask you, so like, how are you going to connect with that person? Do you have any ideas of, like, if you really decided this is my goal, that I'm going to connect with them, I'm going to become friends with them. That's my goal. So like, how would we do that? Would we constantly read about them in the tabloids, or would we be, watching their videos all the time? And those are ways to maybe get to know them a little bit better, but I'm talking about meeting them. How are you going to meet them? And that way that I'm going to introduce, it seems very simple, but it's very deep, because that way is the same way we can understand God. The same way that you can meet a celebrity is what's essential and needed for deeply understanding God. And maybe to help us get there, like, I can ask the question, how are you going to understand God? Of course, you can read about God to understand some aspects of him. You can hear about him from someone who knows. You can pray and meditate. You can even pause under the stars, right? Have you ever stood under the stars or laid under the stars and looked up and really took in the vastness of the sky? And that helps us understand our position, right? It understands that, wow, if this is so vast, like, how vast is God? Or what I love is sitting by the ocean and looking at this, especially early morning, like when no one's around really. And you see the vastness. And I stop and think, if this beach is so huge and this ocean is so endless and so big and so vast, and that's just like a drop in the bucket of God's vastness. So that's, when we understand our position And that's kind of what's happening with this question in the Bhagavad Gita that we're going to cover today that Arjuna's asking. Arjuna, and actually we can even go there and read that. But when I go there is an element of yes, how would we understand God in a way that's realized, in a way that's a deep knowledge, not just intellectual, not just I read about him, I've got some concept, some understanding, but really, how can we understand him in a way that breeds love, in a way that we feel like, oh yeah, I know him, like he's real, and we have a relationship, and that relationship is real. So that's the question of today, and that's the secret that I'll talk about. And the same with the celebrity. Like it actually is the same way that if you want to actually connect to, let's say, having lunch with somebody you admire, somebody in the world that's of clout that you would love to connect to. So Arjuna's question, before we get to the secret, I'll share this verse. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Bhakti Vai Baba Puri Maharaj, Jai Shri A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. So Arjuna said, this is text 4 in chapter 4. Arjuna said, the sun god Vivishvan is senior by birth to you, Krishna. He's talking to Krishna. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? So now we know by reading the Bhagavad Gita that Arjuna actually knows God intimately. Arjuna knows God in a way that maybe we would desire to. Arjuna, he knows Krishna can do anything, and that he's from time immemorial, and he can go back in time and speak to the sun god. He can go forward in time and speak to Arjuna, that he's expansive, that time doesn't limit him. So his age, quote unquote, his age is ranking that Arjuna is referring to, like the sun god's older than Krishna in the body and the form right there. So Arjuna's asking this question not because he actually doesn't know it. And it's the same for the entire Bhagavad Gita. He's asking for our benefit. He's asking because now that he's asked, Krishna's going to talk about himself. Krishna's going to expand deeper understanding in the next verses about who Krishna really is. And so it's for our benefit. So we can understand that Arjuna is helping us to connect. And so again, now here's this question. So understanding God, and we want to understand him, and we're about to hear about him, right? And that's perfect and beautiful, but there's ways of getting realization. And the way of getting realization is related to our attitude, and it's related to another person, another soul connecting us. Like, for example, I've met famous people, and what's happened sometimes is I've met them through a friend of a friend. And actually what's happened often is a friend of a friend of a friend. So, and that actually, ironically, if I really was clear intentioned and I wanted to meet Tony, I could actually make that happen because I have a good friend and we hang out, and she hangs out with someone who has lunch at Tony's house, right? So if I was really like crisp and clear, like, okay, I'm actually gonna ask my friend to introduce me to her friend, is she gonna hang out with me? Yeah, because she loves and knows, I won't say the person's name, but she loves and knows this person, and I love and know this person. So we have a relationship, we have a rapport. And it's not just me like stalking someone and like writing them emails all the time or trying to wait outside of venues where they might be and hey, because then I'm one in like a million, right? I'm one in a million. But what happens when I speak to this, I have someone in mind, this girlfriend, for example, if she speaks to her friend, now that friend has a rapport with Tony Robbins. That friend goes to lunch there. They hang out. Sage is Tony's wife, and her husband and her meet up, the four of them. So they have a rapport, they have love, they have connection, they have care for each other. And so if I develop a rapport, a relationship with her, and I say, hey, I really admire him and I really love Sage and all that she's doing to spread like care and thoughtfulness in our relationships and how they both, Tony and Sage, have impacted me. Right? Then there's an opportunity like, oh yeah, I could invite him to some event and I'll invite you also. So then it's actually made very easy. So connection through someone who already knows them, we can make a connection immediately. We can sit down to have lunch together just by me knowing someone who knows them. And it's the same with God, meaning there are souls who walk this planet Earth that know Krishna. There are souls that know him. Srila Prabhupada is one of those souls. Now, he's not here right now with us, but he's here in his book. So we're reading the books that he translated. So we're spending time with Srila Prabhupada by reading these books. And for example, when I was clear that I wanted a teacher, that I wanted a spiritual teacher who would connect me to God, because there's quotes, like in the Bhagavad Gita, let's see, I have a couple quotes here. Srila Prabhupada in purport 4.4 in the purport, which is what we're reading today, 4.4, he says, "It is very difficult to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the material mind," right? I mean, we can understand our position. Like if we look at the stars and look at the ocean, then do we think we understand how tiny we are? To some degree, we can understand how tiny we are. And do we think our tiny minds are going to understand something that is so vast, like much more vast, like more vast than planet Earth, more vast than all the planets, more vast than the universe is, you know? So one cannot understand him by speculative logic. One cannot understand Krishna or God by speculative logic. It means we can't try to figure him out. We can't use our mind to figure him out. So then it also says, Arjuna's question in the purport also, Arjuna's question is for the benefit of all humanity, as it instructs that Krishna's teachings are eternal and beyond ordinary perception. So Krishna's about to teach us about himself, and we may understand intellectually what he's about to share. But if we are seeking realization, if we are seeking deep understanding of God, not just intellectual understanding, then we must approach a spiritual teacher who already has a loving relationship with God, who already knows him. Just like I spoke about my friend, she already knows this other friend who already knows Tony. So in the same way, I can approach people who know God, and by spending time with them and by serving them and by asking questions and understanding in an attitude, and this is what I said, the attitude matters, in an attitude of love, of affection, and I'll say humility, and humility doesn't mean thinking less of ourselves. It means thinking of ourselves less. True humility means we're focused on others, we're loving and caring them, we're not self-absorbed, where our thoughts are always on us. So that's true humility. It doesn't mean we have to be like, oh, I can't talk, or that's fake. That's like we have ego and we're trying to beat it down by putting on a coat of humility. And that's why the word humility, I think, is misunderstood a lot and also rubs people wrong, because they're like, well, I don't want to be humble and then have people walk all over me. So true humility, you can have strength. Like, look at Srila Prabhupada. He had true humility, and he was poised. He didn't tolerate disrespect. No one would disrespect him, because internally we can feel like he respects himself, he respects others, and yet he understands that God is so much more vast. And so he has that deep, true humility, but in that he's fierce and he's strong and he's powerful, and he shared unsavory truths to the world without flinching. He cut through the BS, and he spoke clearly about things that our minds, our material senses, when we identify with the senses, then the mind's like, oh, I don't want to do that, I don't want to give this up, I don't want to. And he was just really crisp and clear, like, if you want God, these are the things you need to change. Because if you want God, you have to purify your consciousness. You have to wake up the sleeping soul within your body. And to do that, you need to associate with certain sounds. You need to associate with certain people. You need to eat a certain way, because everything we eat impacts our consciousness. Everything we hear and what we spend time with impacts our consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada said all these things very strongly, and he was humble. He was the epitome of humility. And so I want to share that because there'll be some other quotes, about there's Krishna reveals himself only to those who approach him with love and humility. And so I want us to understand really the nuances of what that means, and not like a generic understanding of what humility looks like, where we force ourselves to try to think that we're low. It's like, no, actually, Srila Prabhupada understood also that he's empowered by God, that he matters, and that we matter, that every one of us matters. But that's very different than the false ego, thinking that we're better than others, thinking that we're superior to others, right? That's false ego. And true humility is understanding like we're equals to all the souls on this planet, and we are not equal to God. We're not. We can't spin globes in orbit. We can't make it rain. We can't create oceans, and we can't create all the stars. So we understand our position with grace, humility, and when we approach with the attitude of humility and love and care and a desire to know God, then mercy comes. And actually, I think it was Sridhar Maharaj one time, I was in his lecture, and he said, when you are low, like you bow your head, that is when mercy falls. When you are high and you're lifting your head high, the mercy is, you miss it. The like, let's say the ocean of mercy, the river of mercy, or maybe a waterfall might be a good example. Like it's coming, but your head is higher than that. So when you bow your head, you're acknowledging that there's something superior to you, that there's something great in this universe, and that you're a tiny and powerful and beautiful part of that. And so when we walk in a temple, we place our head to the floor. We place our highest part to the lowest part of that room in care and respect, in reverence, and in acknowledgement of our position. And in doing that, mercy comes. So, yes, Prabhupada says in this purport, one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by devotional service. So, by devotional service. And later, in chapter 4 and text 34, in the purport also, Prabhupada says, a bona fide spiritual master means someone who knows God already. Someone who knows God is going to help you understand God because they already know them. So when they talk about them, you'll feel something. It's not theoretical. I remember when I met my spiritual teacher, who's Srila Bhakti Vaibhava Puri Maharaj, I actually, I won't get into that actually. So he was speaking about Lord Chaitanya and crying. And I remember thinking, why would I respectfully keep my distance from this personality? I was raised, in ISKCON, and my mother said, be respectful to all the Vaishnavas, but she had a certain idea of a boundary that you follow. And I remember thinking, like, I had been praying to Srila Prabhupada. I'd been praying probably by then, only probably about 6 months, but very sincerely. Like, I want a spiritual teacher. I was chanting 16 rounds a day, and I needed help. I could feel it. I could feel that I wasn't making spiritual progress, and that's also in the Bhagavad Gita, that spiritual progress comes from the mercy of a spiritual teacher, comes from the mercy of a guru. And so I was praying. I was praying to Prabhupada, like, I see many sannyasis that I admire and respect, but I hadn't seen one that I thought I can fully surrender to them. If they tell me to do a crazy thing that my mind would go, what? I'll just do it. I was like, no, there's some, I wasn't able to fully surrender. And I knew that. So I prayed. And I didn't know what that would mean. Would Krishna and Prabhupada transform my experience where I would be able to go ahead and fully surrender to some of the souls that I was considering taking spiritual shelter from? And instead, I was basically dragged. I mean, I got incredibly sick, and some devotees from Italy were taking care of me. And then Srila Bhakti Vaibhava Puri Maharaj came, and I was so sick, I couldn't barely move. I literally couldn't take care of myself. It took me, a half an hour to get up and get a drink of water. So they were driving some hours to go see him. And I remember thinking, I'm not inclined in that way. And mainly because of, I'll say, politics within this idea of like, only go under Prabhupada. right? There's a lineage, disciplic succession lineage, and Prabhupada has a lineage underneath him. And so I was avoiding anyone who was like a god brother, because my guru is a god brother to him. But I was so sick, I had no option. I literally had no option. And then I got there, and I remember thinking, okay, I'll just be respectful and, and then go back to my room, whatever. And the first 10 minutes he arrived, he started speaking about Lord Chaitanya, and he was crying. Tears were coming, and I was like, wait a minute. He knows Lord Chaitanya in that way, that intimately, that he has emotions that he can't even because later I learned also that he would speak, but he would not always show his emotion, right? He would keep it in. But for me, when I saw that, then I started, reading all the letters in the archives between Prabhupada and my guru, and understanding their relationship, and trying to understand for myself, who is this sadhu? Who is this saint? And obviously I ended up deciding that he was my guru, he was my teacher. And I know that he came from Srila Prabhupada's mercy, because I was in Prabhupada's Samadhi in Vrindavan, I was in Prabhupada's Pushpa Samadhi in Mayapur, means, anyway, I don't have to go into all the details, but these beautiful temples where there's Srila Prabhupada's deity, and we're offering things to Prabhupada, and we're thinking of Srila Prabhupada, and we're praying. I was praying to him so intensely, and I was thinking, please let me please you. That was my prayer, actually. It wasn't like, oh, give me a guru. That was in my heart, that I knew I needed help. But it was, please let me please you. Srila Prabhupada, please let me please you. And that was I held on to that prayer, and I said it all day long, actually, for quite a while. And I remember thinking, that's all I want. That is all I want. And then a few months later, I meet this sadhu, this saint that knows Krishna. And he changed my life. There's so many miracles that happened after my initiation later down the road, where I perceived subtle things that I know was mercy. I know is mercy. So that's the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. You have to connect to someone who knows Krishna already. Just like if I want to meet with Tony, I need to meet that woman who's friends with my friend who knows him. I have to meet her and connect to her and develop a rapport. And in the same way that we develop loving relationships here, you develop a loving relationship with your spiritual teacher. You serve them, you give them gifts, you offer food to them, you ask them questions. So that's what the Bhagavad Gita says. He says, see, I don't think I have that one in my notes. No, but when you find a spiritual teacher, you submissively, humbly approach them, and you serve them, and you ask them questions. And that is the path to understanding God. That is the path to getting the mercy, getting the realizations, because Krishna says you can't, he says it later, actually in this chapter, that you can't understand him just from speculation. So that's the connection. And if we're truly seeking understanding God, then we do have to approach a spiritual teacher. And I know that can be a journey, and that's why I shared my journey, because it's not always black and white. It's not always crystal clear, like who is that person for you? And it's essential. It's essential. So I had some technical difficulties today as well on my computer. I have a bunch of quotes, but it's on my laptop, and it's not accessible. So I'll open it up maybe for questions, because I can't share all the beautiful quotes I compiled together, but I gave the essence.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Haripriya. We really appreciate it. I love how you, equated that, right, to, if we want to know Krishna, if we want to kind of reach that next level in our spiritual life, we need to find someone to help us make that connection. So I guess just asking, and I also really appreciate you sharing your story a little bit about, how you prayed to find your spiritual master and how you came into contact with that person. And we would love to, kind of go into that more deeply another time if you would like to. But I guess, like, if anyone is watching this and they're thinking, I've been feeling that way, or I really would like to find a spiritual teacher, I need that in my life. And like you said, it is a journey. And, for some people, maybe it's more linear than others. But I mean, what would you suggest for them or for us? Like, where do we start? Like,
I mean, it's kind of in what I shared already, that sincerity, I think, is what really matters. And, I was already following Srila Prabhupada's instructions, right? Srila Prabhupada gave us like, and this is just one of the multitude, right? I mean, he translated over, I don't even know, 20, 30 books. So I'd say following a pure soul's instructions is the starting point, probably, and following Srila Prabhupada's mood and teachings. And watching Srila Prabhupada memories is really fun. I love hearing when Prabhupada disciples and students share, and you can literally just like put that on YouTube, like Srila Prabhupada memories, and you hear all these wild stories of the real human he was, right? So and I think that gives a sense of Krishna in this Bhagavad Gita, right? We can read the Bhagavad Gita and understand something of Srila Prabhupada, something of what he thinks and believes and how he shares, but to understand how he handles nuanced situations, right? The same exact situation could happen, and the soul that's in front of him that's doing it, he might have embraced and hugged. And the same situation, he might yell at them. Like, what? Well, that's because he's real. There's nuances to his instructions, right? So I think sometimes, I wish I had met him. I met him in my dreams a few times, but I think even if I want to get to know Srila Prabhupada, it's the same thing. I have to spend time with people who knew him, because there's nuances, right? And if I want to know Krishna, then I can get to know a soul that without a shadow of a doubt was a pure devotee. We know Srila Prabhupada was a pure soul that came from the spiritual realm just to teach us. There's no way someone could sleep 2 hours a night, translate books, all the time, be so present and caring and calm with, like, he had so much to do, but if someone came in his room and asked a question, he always had time. He was so personal. There's memories where a disciple was like arrested for some illegal activity, and Srila Prabhupada picked up the phone and called him and said, "What's going on? How are you?" Right? It's mind-blowing how personal he was. And that's also why he's so loved, because when a soul who's so personal, so loving walks the earth, and they give so much care. So I would say the first step is getting to know Srila Prabhupada. That was my link. And of course that's because that's my mother and father's teacher. So I grew up with his teachings, but he's accessible to everyone. He's what they call the Yuga Acharya. For thousands of years, people are going to be reading the books that he translated into English. So he's all of our grandpas. Like, he is all of our fathers. He literally is the caretaker for this planet. And so that would be my suggestion, is like, make a connection with him, because through him, anything can happen, and you'll meet the person who is still alive today, walking the earth, that is meant to be your guide, your personal guide, that you can ask questions to and learn from. That would be my suggestion.
No, yeah, that is very powerful, and that's amazing advice. So thank you so much for sharing that, and I especially appreciate that it's rooted in your own personal experience, right? Like, you are, yeah. So thanks so much for that, and for everything else that you've shared. And Colleen, thank you for joining us again, and to everyone who may be watching this later. So it was great to see you, Haripriya, and we hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you to both of you.